Thanks for tuning in to this Stardom discussion on Stardom's faction and roster health and the upcoming changes facing the company. In the month of April alone, we have witnessed one of this promotion's biggest stars wrestle for the final time in Japan, and one of this promotion's newest factions suffering its first betrayal. We still have Stardom's biggest show ever to look forward to at the end of this month, and we are a couple of months away from the return of Stardom, the conversion, which could also introduce even more shocking changes. To understand where Stardom finds itself and where it might be going, I need someone with a lot of insights and a lot of ideas. So my guest today from Talk for Glory is Enigma V4. Enigma V4, how is your day going so far?
Hey, Jess, my day's going great. I have been active. I've been all over the place, and I'm going to continue my night by talking about Stardom.
You're not the only one who's been all over the place. I think Stardom itself has been absolutely all over the place. They're going to be all over the map pretty soon as they're flying internationally, and then they are going to try and crush the world in their just in one fell swoop with All-Star Grand Queendom coming up at the end of this month. So we got to try and gather our thoughts. We got to try and build up our defenses, get ready for this assault. And I think the best way to do that is maybe look at the roster itself, which could be making a number of different sort of chess moves and changes, and try and figure out where the factions are as it stands prior to the show and where they might be going with the show itself and afterwards.
Yeah, it's probably best that we do look at the roster, because how it is today may not be how it is next week, next month. A lot can change in a week to 30 days.
Yeah, I'm going to try and keep my head from not spinning too many times around, because I think that potentially there's a whirlwind that might be hitting us. It's hard to guarantee that. It's hard to know how true that will be. But maybe just talking about this, we'll try and figure some things out as we take a look at not only Cosmic Angels, not only EXV, God's Eye, H.A.T.E, Neogenesis, and Stars, but also the unaffiliated wrestlers who, either because they're rookies or because they have chosen to go into business for themselves, are not currently tied to a faction. So thinking about the roster as a whole, zooming all the way out and thinking about everybody there, we're only in the month of April, but this year has had some pretty big moments and some pretty big matches happen. So the first thing I'm curious about is just to know, out of all the factions right now in the year 2025 with All-Star Grand Queendom on its way, is there one faction that stands out to you that you think has been doing some very interesting things, or that you think will be doing some very interesting things in the near future?
A faction that has caught my eye as of recently, probably within literally like the last 2 weeks of the month, is probably Stars. Stars is, for better lack of terms, on top of the world, but also on the edge of a cliff. If you look at Stars, what's not to love? You got Mayu Iwatani, the longest reigning IWGP Women's Champion. She currently has the longest reigning Women's Championship of the 2020s, probably of the modern era, next to Athena of Ring of Honor. You got Wing Gory, they're Goddess of Stardom Tag Team Champions. You got FWC, who are Oz Academy Tag Team Champions. And even though she's got no belt, she really is the brighter side of Stars. She is Momokoga. And again, it's just what not to love about this group. But as I sing this group's praises, as I name their accomplishments, as I name their best qualities and features, they're not on the best of terms. They're not this tight-knit family as I described. So yeah. We're on the verge of celebration, but we're also on the verge of implosion.
I'm going to highlight real quickly a faction that I think has been doing a great job, not only of establishing themselves in this company, but also telling a story that is heavily based around the fact that they are somewhat the new kids on this block. And that is Neogenesis. They have not yet even been around for a full year, but when they leapt onto the scene, they made a statement that they wanted to claim as many of the championship belts as possible. That was the thing that they set their sights on, having every member in the faction itself wearing some kind of gold. And the fact that that didn't fully come to fruition became a bit of a rift for the characters involved in this group. And the way that things have gone horribly wrong, the path that has taken, the way that it's resembled some of the other faction strife in the past, but has also changed and done something unique, something that I didn't expect to happen at the time it did, has made this really cool. And now we only, all we can do from here is kind of see where they're going to go moving forward. So we will definitely get more specific with both of these factions. But first and foremost, what I think we might want to do is go through each of these groups. We'll start in alphabetical order, and we'll be talking about maybe a couple of specific wrestlers that are either doing something that's particularly intriguing or have caught your eye or my eye for one reason or another. And then we can start to put on the tinfoil hats, do a bit of speculation, and try and get a sense of what kind of faction movement will happen, what type of positional movement might happen, or do we think that the group cohesion and the group status quo will stay the same? So I think this will get quite intriguing right off the bat. Starting alphabetically, we'll go ahead and start with Cosmic Angels, one of the big fan favorite factions, a faction that has always been under the leadership of Tam Nakano, the top kawaii of the cosmos. She's now been reduced in stature to a freelancer in Stardom, which is a very strange sort of concept that they are running with. And I think there are a lot of potential question marks, potential exclamation points that could be happening with this faction. So first question for our first faction is, are there any members in this group that stand out to you right now or that you think should be worth really paying close attention to?
I think someone that doesn't get enough talk is Yuna Mizumori, just because I think it's due to how long she's been with Cosmic Angels. I'm pretty sure it's been a year or two now. She's been in the group for about a year or two, and her highlight, in my opinion, is probably her high-speed championship match against May Sierra. And to a lot of people, that started to open the door for, hey, what about Yuna? We talk about Tam, we talk about Poi, we talk about Ano. What about Yuna? I think the big three need to start becoming the big four and adding Yuna Mizumori.
I think that's a great choice. And she's currently the only Cosmic Angels member to neither have won a title nor a tournament of some kind. Sayaka Kurara doesn't have a belt yet, but as you and I discussed, she most recently won the Cinderella tournament, and she's still very, very sneakily holding on to that Cinderella wish for reasons currently unknown. But yeah, that is a great choice. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm so curious about that wish.
Of course. Yeah, it's hard not to be, especially with this huge show looming on the horizon. And the only thing we really have to compare it to in recent times is how Mirai held on to her wish. And that just played out so strangely that it's not a good precedent to have been set, but I will reserve judgment until we see the full sort of story play out, I guess. It's not something I can really accurately predict.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, speaking of Cosmic Angels as a whole, it's also not very easy to ignore the elephant in the room of this faction. Maybe not the best metaphor to speak about the top kawaii of the cosmos, but Tam Nakano is hard not to have any of your focus directed towards because of the upcoming gigantic match that she's involved in, the main event of what Stardom is hoping will be its biggest show of all time, and a match in which, if we take the stipulations at face value, will possibly result in the immediate retirement of Tam Nakano. So I just can't help but watch her matches, watch her interactions with other people, and try to see if I can notice something. If I notice maybe the emotions being a little bit higher than usual, maybe something being exchanged between Tam and another character that she has spent a lot of time with, to try and see, are they internally realizing that this is in fact the end of the Tam road, or very nearly about to be the end. So I'm watching Tam, trying to figure out what she's got up her sleeve, and I'm coming up blank at the moment. But my follow-up question in terms of this faction is, if we look towards the near future, if we try to find out, are there going to be any roster shifts? Will there be people coming into Cosmic Angels or leaving? Do you have any expectations here? Is there something you see on the horizon in terms of someone leaving this faction behind or joining their ranks?
The only thing I can predict for right now is worst case scenario. If let's say Tam is to lose and retire, I don't think we're going to go long without a leader. I would probably assume that if it's not like split down the middle, voted on, I could potentially see Sourei versus Natsupoi for a leader. And no ill will, it's just them coming to an agreement of, hey, we need a leader if Tam's not going to be here. So I'm kind of like, got that in the back of my head, like that is a possibility. Maybe it might be at the show they're promoting.
Oh, that's a good point. Sourei and Natsupoi do have that very unique 10th anniversary special event that is coming up in the month of May. So the way these things are lining up does start to make us try to narrow our sort of the radar to try and piece together, just looking at the calendar, how this might unfold. So I like that you mentioned Natsupoi and Sourei because they are both at the top of my list. And I think if Tam does retire, I think there are two main possibilities. One is the perhaps less likely possibility that the Cosmic Angels faction altogether will cease to exist because, like I said, it has always been Tam Nakano's faction. And without her, I'm not sure if the other wrestlers would want to try and take her place or try to navigate this faction without her guiding sort of leadership and guiding command. So if they don't go that route, I'm pretty close to what you are anticipating. However, I think that with the dynamic between Natsupoi and Sourei, I could see them just agreeing to collectively, the two of them, guide the faction in sort of a way that we've seen with EXV in the past, or sort of how we have Neo Genesis now, where one of them is more considered a leader, but they have that secondary leader as available as well. So I could kind of see them both taking up the captain position, but it all really hinges upon what the hell Tam is planning to do, and that is the part that I really don't know about. So I'm glad we've at least started to talk about this, started to think about that Sourei and Natsupoi show afterwards and potential announcements that they might make. Let's transfer to the next faction for us to discuss. This is a faction that has already been hit by a roster shift. Nexus V, Empress, Nexus, Venus, or if you just want to shorten things and make it less confusing, EXV has already officially said goodbye to Mina Shirakawa. They will be having a couple final matches with her, or some of the members will, in Las Vegas, but Mina Shirakawa is going to be hitching her wagon to AEW and leaving Stardom, which will make the Venus portion of Empress Nexus Venus no longer make a lot of sense.
I was wondering that, like, if Mina's gone, does that mean like the Venus part is gone as well? It's
an amazing question to be asking. It's an obvious question to ask. Maybe we can get to the bottom of this, but before we do that, I'm going to highlight one wrestler here. And in a similar fashion as you mentioning Yuna Mizumori in Cosmic Angels, I actually have been paying attention to the work of Rian in Nexus V, because she's been around for over a year at this point, and she has still not accomplished any type of victory, any type of match win. She has not pinned or submitted or even won via disqualification yet. And sometimes you just can't help but root for a person like that keeps trying with everything they have, keeps putting in 100%. And Rian has been showing some very cool developments, I think. She's also somebody that is showing a bit of a high-speed style more and more as she gets in the mix with some of the wrestlers that we associate with high speed. She is starting to try and match them and match that frenetic pace, match those exchanges, those roll-ups, those reversals, those counter moves. And so I want to see more people in the high-speed division in general. It's not the hugest sort of talent pool to draw from, but I also want to see how they're going to continue to progress her and start getting her wins. She's actually already been in a couple of tournaments. She was in the Goddess of Stardom Tag League last year, and she was in the Cinderella. Not a very long tournament run for her. As I mentioned, she hasn't gotten a single win yet.
Right.
So she's more experienced than you really realize. And now I want to see what the next level is for Rian.
I think in the grand list of Nexus V, who's been catching my eye is probably Maika. And it's not like she's doing anything new. I think what draws me into her in terms of the faction is she's still consistent. Like, yeah, she's not red belt champion and she's not going on this undefeated run, but she still has that leader-like role. She still has her dominance. She still has her power. When it comes to Maika, actually, when it comes to like, hey, who's one of the strongest people? Who's one of the toughest people in Stardom? It's still Maika. So I like the fact that no matter she's teaming with Hanako or she's having fun with Mina, I love the fact that when you get down to it, Maika is still one of the toughest people in Stardom. And you just can't forget that.
Damn right. Okay. You said it, not me. I can't disagree with that at all. Fairly recently, Maika grabbed a microphone and called out Sayaka Kamitani. It was after the triple threat match that they had, I want to say on the 11th. Sayaka Kamitani, Maika, and Ida. And it sounded like Maika is still a little bit sour, still a little bit sore with the treacherous actions of Sayaka Kamitani. So there is a chance that they will lock horns in the future. There's a lot of ifs that we need to throw in along with that. Yes. But Maika is also going to be taking on a very, very, very difficult opponent, Chihiro Hashimoto at All-Star Grand Queendom.
Or talk about power.
Yeah, so her strength is absolutely going to be put to the test. And also her durability, because she's going to take a lot of hits in that match, no doubt about it.
She's going to get slammed, hit, all of it.
It's going to be rough. I can already tell. So as far as this faction moving forward, EXV, we've just talked about the fact that their name doesn't even really work anymore. My prediction with this is that EXV will not disband, but rather they will recruit, at the very least, one of the newest rookies, Yuria Hime. And I believe I read this, that Mina Shirakawa gifted at least one of her wrestler uniforms to Yuria and gifted some other advice to Yuria. And I think this rookie, who's got a bit of a glamorous side, who seems to have some kind of a modeling background or some level of modeling experience, she will get a nickname that is the Venus something or the something Venus, and she will become the successor to Mina Shirakawa, and they'll kind of shoehorn this in and make the faction name still kind of work, but kind of not really, but they'll just run with it. So that's what I'm thinking they're going to do. What are your thoughts about what's next for this faction?
I kind of thought about the same thing, because Mina's style it's not something like everyone can have. And I think Yuria actually is one of the people where if you ask, hey, do you think she can do the Mina Shirakawa dance? I think if you show her how to do it at least 5 times, I think she's got it down packed. If Yuria starts doing some Mina Shirakawa moves, I think a lot can be taken from Mina and given to Yuria, and that can be like the new Venus.
That's sort of my best guess of what will happen. There is, of course, a chance that some of the members will kind of splinter off and do something else, and maybe this faction will ultimately get cannibalized and become different things or new things. So those eventualities or those outcomes are possible. But I just have a feeling, based on what's happened and the reverence for Mina that these other wrestlers seem to have, that they'll want to keep the spirit of this faction and keep the name and just sort of...
What do you think will happen to Xena?
It's a really tough question to answer, because it seems to be the case that she's dealing with a pretty rough long-term injury. At the same time, I checked in on her social media just to kind of try and get a sense of what she's up to. Is she still in the mix? And she still seems to be in Japan from what I can tell. And she does respond to things that EXV are doing. I think the only reason we haven't seen her 100%, or that we haven't seen like 1% of her activity, is just because they haven't been doing any shows with like English commentary. If they were, I think they would definitely invite her to be a part of that. But right now, they don't seem to have a lot for her to do other than kind of rest and rehab her injury. So I have a feeling she's gonna return, but they just don't want to rush it. And maybe now that I'm thinking about it, we've got the conversion coming up in June. That was the event last year where she challenged for the red belt and her loyalty to Maika was in question. So if they were going to pick a time to throw her back into Stardom, that would be a decent option. It's also not that far away from the 5-star. So to keep that sort of question or that mystery about her status and then throw her back in, have her show up at the conversion, have her show up in the 5-star, I could definitely see them doing something along those lines. If she wants to stick around, I don't know if there are any visa issues or anything, and if she can be healthy in that time.
Yeah, I kind of agree on that as well. When I think of Xena and Nexus V, or just I guess Stardom as a whole, not a lot of factions have Gaijins, and I think in terms of the American audience, if people aren't too familiar with Maika or Mina, I think a close familiar face for a lot of fans is Xena. So whether she comes back at the conversion or right before the 5-star, I think Xena's return is definitely on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, it's going to get a bit serious here. This is one of the largest factions currently in terms of roster size, and one of the most painful factions to face because you end up getting kicked, you end up getting your limbs twisted. They start to wring your neck with chokes and submissions. We got God's Eye, the faction led by Shuri, who will be challenging for the IWGP title in a very, very anticipated rematch with Mayu Iwatani at All-Star Grand Queendom. But before we talk about Shuri in particular, or before we get too focused in on title matches, please let me know who in God's Eye right now, out of the 7 members, some of them are injured, some of them are very active. Who do you think we should be watching at the moment, and why would you select them as the person to follow and focus on?
So the person I think people need to really keep a close eye on right now is probably Ranna Yagami. If you look at the time where everyone joins God's Eye, everyone kind of just does the same thing of, hey, I want to join you, Shuri. And although Ranna Yagami isn't too different, I'm not saying she's challenging Shuri for her spot in God's Eye. I think when you watch a Ranna Yagami match, whether Shuri's ringside or it's a tag match, Ranna Yagami wrestles with the most approved to Shuri.
That's quite an observation. So really getting into the interpersonal dynamics of this faction. And with God's Eye, you do get the sense, because every faction has the dynamic of the leader or the more experienced veterans, the rookies, the younger wrestlers who are looking up to them, trying to make them proud, trying to live up to the very high standard. But in God's Eye, that feels even more important because for most of these wrestlers, they have that highly disciplined traditional martial arts ethic that they seem to be living by, a code that they seem to be living by. So when someone is trying to get the approval of Shuri and not let her down, it seems like they really, really, really mean it. So I think that's good that you singled that out. Now, of course, there's one person in this group that probably doesn't live by that code too strongly. That's Saki Kashima, but she's a very unique case, and her presence in this faction is very much appreciated for entertainment value alone.
Yeah, I love Saki Kashima and God's Eye. At first, I was so against it, but now it's just like, yeah, she's also trying to prove stuff to Shuri, but it's also like, to a certain level, she's pulling her own weight. And I love that for her. So
I'm going to highlight someone in this faction that I don't think you will be too mad about in terms of me giving them an honorable mention here. I have to bring up the work of Tomoka Inaba. Ooh. She has definitely seized my attention and isn't letting go, because I feel like she has pretty much put it all together. If you think about what you're looking for from a wrestler participating in Stardom, she has a fully realized character. She's got the confidence. She's got the activity on social media, the fan interactions, her selling in the ring, her technique in the ring, the way she structures her matches and keeps them very, very watchable and dynamic, her chemistry with other wrestlers, and all of these other intangibles that she has. I just have to tip my hat to her, or, hats off to her, I guess is the phrase. I have to give her a lot of credit for what she's done, because it's not easy being someone who's not exclusively a Stardom wrestler coming into an already very like competitive faction that's had a lot of members. Some people have left, and the roster right now with Sourei being injured, Saki Kashima not currently active, and the other wrestlers not having a lot of accolades behind them, they need a presence in there that will do battle with some of the higher tier opposition and also keep the prestige of this faction fairly high. So I think she's doing a really good job with that. That would be the person I would highlight. But there's also another reason I will highlight Tomoka Inaba as we start to talk about what is next for God's Eye. I think there is a lingering uncertainty or question of whether or not Tomoka Inaba will be staying in this faction long term, since she has been approached in the past by members of Neo Genesis who, with maybe one exception, all pretty much have the same thing in common, which is that they were all born at the same what am I trying to say? They were all born in the same year. They're the same age. So not only are they Neo Genesis, like the new generation, but they are the exact same generation. They have this really cool thing in common. And Tomoka Inaba has this in common with them as well. And I think in almost the reverse way that Saki Kashima sort of has this interesting dichotomy with God's Eye, Tomoka Inaba could come into Neo Genesis with this very strict martial arts. I practice all the time. I train all the time. I live by a code. I do things by the book. I do things a certain way. And Neo Genesis are like, why don't you just cut loose? Why don't you just forget all about that? We're trying to have fun. We're trying to get the crowd amped. And I think that might be kind of interesting for them to play with. It's just a question of, will they do that or won't they?
I love that you said it, not me. But I completely agree with you on the whole Tomoka Inaba to Neo Genesis stuff. I've been wondering about that since a recent departure of someone in Neo Genesis. And if you look at the difference between Tomoka Inaba in the ring and Tomoka Inaba's social media, in ring, very much God's Eye. Social media, Neo Genesis. If you like look at, let's say, Starlight Kid and Miyu Amasaki, because they're very social media influencers, basically. If you add Tomoka Inaba in there, it just feels right. It looks right. And adding on to what you said, how Tomoka Inaba could be a very by the books person to, hey, just cut loose. That would be such a fun story to watch.
Okay. And so would you say that is your expectation in terms of God's Eye's roster evolution? Is that the main thing that you're thinking could be what happens, or are there any other types of changes you're anticipating from here?
Yeah, I'm very much anticipating Tomoka Inaba to Neo Genesis, whether it be this week, next week, the next month. I've been saying that last year's 5-star triple threat between Mei Sierra, Azumi, and Tomoka Inaba was a precursor to her eventually joining. Maybe I'll be right, maybe I'll be wrong. But if there's one thing I really am looking forward to, it's the return of Sourei.
Me as well.
Power that like not just Shuri has.
Yeah, for sure. And Sourei is also in that same sort of category as Xena right now, where she's been out for a real long time. And you kind of wonder where the story will place her when she comes back. One of the great things she did prior to her injury is she started building up these very fiery rivalries, really getting into it with Hanan, really getting into it with Saori Ano in the lead up to their white belt title match. She even had little smaller rivalries here and there when she was a tag wrestler and when she was trying to build herself up to fight for the white belt. So I think she's probably had plenty of time to start to brainstorm how she wants to revisit some of these rivalries or maybe make new ones. So yeah, I'm highly anticipating her return. And I think they're pretty high on her. I think they will push her when she comes back, not necessarily in a crazy way, but they're not going to make her build herself back up from a low level. I think they're going to just really go for it.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. I don't think I can add on than that.
All right. Well, we got to talk about a scary subject here. The scariest faction in all of Stardom and the largest faction. So not only are their tactics just completely malicious and antagonizing, but they have the numbers as well. We have to talk about harass, abuse, terrorize, eradicate the faction known as H.A.T.E. Led by Natsuko Tora, the intelligent monster is her nickname, and with many people in their ranks, They have an invisible cigarette smoking clown, and everything beyond that. That's just their starting. That is their opening salvo. Is they lead with a character like that. H.A.T.E is another one of those newer factions. They came around the same time as Neo Genesis. However, we of course know that the previous iteration that was Oedo-Tai is not too terribly far off from this. They've only sort of expanded the roster, made the tactics and the weaponry even more like cruel and evil, and they're getting very serious. Two of these members are or have been red belt champions. They've been collecting belts. They, Sayaka Kamitani right now also has the Regina D Wave title. So they are to be taken a little bit more seriously than perhaps even Oedo-Tai at times was. Now that we look at this roster of 9 members, I guess I'll single out somebody real quick, and it's for the same reason that I singled out Tam Nakano. I'm going to single out Sayaka Kamitani because she is embarking on this very high stakes match. The loser must immediately retire. Not only is her red belt on the line, the Regina D Wave title is also on the line. Apparently, this is a no seconds allowed match, which is implying that no one else from H.A.T.E nor anyone from Cosmic Angels can get in the mix and impact the result of this match. However, I kind of wonder if that stipulation is there as foreshadowing for something crazy that's going to happen. Who knows? But I mean, this is kind of unknown territory for us. The biggest show of the year, the biggest show maybe in Stardom's history. This main event that Sayaka Kamitani is a part of, continuing the story, continuing the rivalry with Tam Nakano, and trying to take it to the most extreme place they possibly can. I couldn't see where else they could go with this other than like loser must be decapitated or something. Like they're trying to just make this the most important match it can be. So what are they going to do with it? How is it going to play out? How is it going to end? And whoever's left standing at the end of this, whether it's both of them, whether it's one of them, or something else that I can't foresee, what happens next? So I have to look at her and try and figure that out, and I have failed to do so up to this point.
What's thrown me a curveball about Sayaka Kamitani is if you look at recent matches featuring both Tam Nakano and Sayaka Kamitani, is their opponents are speaking to both these wrestlers as if this is the last time. And yes, both factions have their supporters. Not support doesn't believe Tam will lose, and I'm sure like Konami doesn't think Saya will lose. But when you look at the triple threat featuring Saida, Maika, and Kamitani, yes, Maika does say that there's some unfinished beef there. There's still some loose ends that need to be tied up there. But she speaks with uncertainty. Maybe this triple threat was my last time against you. And same thing with Tam Nakano in her matches. She recently had a match against, well, I guess Cosmic Angels had a match against H.A.T.E, and Natsuko Tora spoke with uncertainty about unfinished beef. Maybe this is the last time that they go at it. So I do have to look at both parties here and go, is this the last time you are facing these wrestlers? And I do love that. That's what I'm, walking into All-Star Grand Queendom. That's what I'm looking at H.A.T.E for. That's what I'm looking at Cosmic Angels for, is if this is the last time we get these kind of matches.
Yeah, no doubt. And the interesting thing about this faction is that there are other members of this group that I'm also suspicious might either exit the group itself or be kicked out of the group, or maybe even exit Stardom altogether. And neither of those people are named Sayaka Kamitani. Looking at H.A.T.E as an entire entity, I can see a couple of things happening this year. I can definitely see the potential for Thekla, the idol killer, the toxic spider, getting fired from Stardom. This is something you and I have talked about in the past.
Yes.
In the storyline, being fired, but in reality, departing from Stardom and trying her hand maybe with some of the American promotions, and maybe getting in the mix with Athena once again. There's a few different ways that could go. But I also could definitely see the Black Peach, Momo Watanabe, getting kicked out of this faction, and specifically within the next 2 or 3 months. We mentioned that Stardom the Conversion is coming up. That was a huge moment in Momo Watanabe's career. That was her first official tease of her turning babyface when Oedo Tai faced Queen's Quest in the faction war, in which the losing unit would have to cast out 4 members. Momo Watanabe teased a babyface turn. Then she went back on it. She revisited the moment that we saw first with her Queen's Quest betrayal, where we had the fake out, the steel chair fake out. And she tricked all of Queen's Quest, her former faction, and absolutely devastated them, and they never recovered. This year at the conversion, we could see something that not necessarily echoes that, but something that continues the what might be a tradition of Momo Watanabe having big, how should I say this, big alignment shifting potential stories, turmoil, yes, playing out. And I think that would be a good way for Stardom to prep and prime their 5-star GP. Having this change of alignment, this change of heart for Momo Watanabe, and placing her in the 5-star GP as a real wild card, someone who is turning over a new leaf, turning the page, starting a new chapter, and making her one of the potential either favorites, or it wouldn't be a dark horse, one of the potential aces of that tournament, or I should say, like, one of the live wires of that tournament, who could threaten to go the full way through. So what do you think either about that as an idea, or what kind of ideas do you have about where H.A.T.E can go for the remainder of 2025?
So when it comes to Momo Watanabe, I'm happy that you pointed out her turmoil. I don't think the betrayal, I guess the second betrayal of Queen's Quest, was pre-planned. I think it was heat of the moment where Momo was really choosing between Oedo Tai and Queen's Quest, and she made her decision, but I don't think she was content with it. I want to point out her second time, I guess, fighting honorably, which was when she fought Mayu Iwatani at Historic X Crossover. And I think as the months go by, we're going to have matches where that turmoil is going to come back, which I do agree with you can come full circle, possibly at the conversion where she could possibly get kicked out. And I would love to see Momo Watanabe go on this I don't need anybody kind of run and just run through the 5-star with that kind of energy, that kind of mentality. But that's like focusing on Momo Watanabe. Someone else I actually really want to focus on, because I've had multiple discussions involving this person, is Rina. Rina is, what's the word? Rina is on top of the world, but she still keeps going up. The sky's the limit for that kid. And it's gotten to a point where people are even saying Rina should probably have her own faction. So not only do I agree with you on the idea of Momo Watanabe possibly getting kicked out of H.A.T E, I could see Rina, possibly even Azusa and Naba following suit. I could see Rina looking at the group as a whole and really piecing together the pieces that she's had such a stellar year. I want to say years, because she was great at 17 years old, and she's getting better at 18 years old. She could look at the landscape of H.A.T E and just think to herself, I'm better than this, and I'm only 18. I'm going to be better than this. So I could see her wanting to just like detach from them.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I like that you're bringing up Rina and giving her flowers. Rina has been faced with a lot of challenges in terms of being a performer, and she's faced a lot of tests in regards to star power. Will she be able to headline a big show? Will she be able to put together a white belt title match? Will she be able to make her way through a tournament, get to the finals, and have a big match there? And as you said, she's cleared every challenge pretty much with flying colors each single time. I didn't really think that much about Rina having her own faction, but we know she's got the charisma to do that. We know she has the attitude and the star power to do that. The only funny thing is they'd almost be like the Neo Genesis, because they'd be even younger than the people in Neo Genesis. They'd probably be calling them hags and old grandmas and stuff.
I would love that. And even
so that would be hilarious.
Genesis.
Yeah, that'd be hilarious. Just real quick to go back to Momo Watanabe, another thing that could possibly happen is they might not even wait till we get to the conversion. You and I covered last year's All-Star Grand Queendom after it happened. And two of the big things that happened at that show was, one, Momo Watanabe got a huge opportunity. She was in the main event, but also Oedo Tai last year, when they were Oedo Tai, kicked out a major member. And at that time, it was Starlight Kid. This year, we might get some kind of hybrid thing, because not everyone in H.A.T.E has been booked for a match yet. We have to assume maybe there'll be some kind of tag situation, which would mean that Momo would be in some kind of match with someone like Konami or maybe Natsuko Tora, maybe Ruaka, who was the person that fired the first shot at Starlight Kid to get her out of there. So can't count it out. They haven't really announced, because Momo is also dealing with some kind of injury right now, so she hasn't been in action. But we can't count out the fact that if they want to make All-Star Grand Queendom even more memorable than it's going to be, if there's also this double cross that happens within their ranks.
I could also see like you mentioned when we first started talking about H.A.T.E, this is the largest faction in Stardom currently going on. I can possibly see Natsuko Tora just thinking, okay, we're getting too big. Time to shorten, time to cut the grass.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The size of the roster, the size of the H.A.T E roster, you just can't help but think they're going to do something to thin out the herd.
They betray each other.
Yeah. It's actually surprising it hasn't happened yet, to be honest. So speaking of betrayals, let's go ahead and talk about Neo Genesis, who not only have recently dealt with just a heartbreaking betrayal, but coming up at All-Star Grand Queendom will have their two most accomplished members doing battle for a very, very lofty prize. Neo Genesis, as many of you know, have been around for less than 1 year. Their original lineup consisted of 5 wrestlers, each of whom had something unique that they brought to the table, had a high level of skill, and they seem to be climbing the ranks of Stardom, not only by securing the Wonder of Stardom title. Miyu Amasaki, prior to that, took home the Future of Stardom title, and they currently have their hands on the Artist of Stardom belts. But in spite of all of that, their former member, Suzuki, couldn't have the same fortune. She tried to take the red belt a couple of times and was not successful. Crazy Star, the team of Suzuki and Mei Sarah, tried to take the Goddess of Stardom belts. They couldn't make it work, and things just continued to crumble from there. So with the pieces of Neo Genesis that are left, the 4 members that remain, Enigma V4, who are you currently looking at with the most interest as we get closer to All-Star Grand Queendom here?
I'm trying so hard not to be biased.
You can be biased if you want.
Biased speaking, I want to say Azumi, just because I want to say in the next 90 days, not 90, like we're on like almost 60 days, 40 days-ish, Azumi's going to be on a world tour at high speed. She's going just about after everyone, everywhere. She's going against Starlight Kid. She's going against potentially Mercedes Moné. And then she's also, I believe, doing some matches in England. And this is all, again, 1/3 of the artist champion. So it's not like she's just content with one thing. And as someone that's constantly talked about Azumi's accomplishments or huge victories or great matches, she's nowhere near her limit. So the only thing we can now watch is when does she hit her limit?
Yeah, no doubt about that. I'll try not to go too far into this, but Azumi's one of those people that the opportunity she's getting right now, like you said, we're going to see her challenging for a number of belts. It's a wonder that she hasn't been able to do that already. When you hear that she's challenging for the white belt for the first time, yep, you're like scratching your head, wondering like, what were they waiting for? But they're putting her in very big matches. She wrestled in the Tokyo Dome for the IWGP title. That's about as big of a crowd as you can hope to get, at least for Stardom at the current state that they're in. And the match with Starlight Kid, we know, has like the highest expectations you could place on a match right now. And she, we should probably just bring this up real quick. This kind of slipped under the radar a little bit, and I was shocked to see this. She was recently in a tag match. I believe it was Azumi and Miyu Amasaki against Sayaka Kamitani and Konami. And the result of that match was that Azumi pinned Sayaka Kamitani.
Oh, I was going to hold on to that till like 5-star season, but hey, you brought it up, not me.
Yeah. And so now you're just wondering, okay, does this mean she's going to get a red belt match as well on top of all the other things? I definitely have no idea, because that decision really puzzled me. Maybe it'll make more sense as we go, but I have no objection to picking Azumi. I would definitely have her as someone to watch, but I'm going to just highlight Starlight Kid for just a moment, because I think what Starlight Kid is doing right now in her career is truly amazing. She's been placed on a pedestal, or she's been placed in the spotlight, and she has absolutely risen to the occasion. The white belt prior to Starlight Kid's reign had a number of fast moving changing of hands. It had a number of fast moving sort of transitions. We went from Saori Ano, who defended a couple of times, to Mika Iwata, back to Saori Ano, then to Natsupoi. And so the belt never really had a chance to settle and get into a groove where we felt like somebody is here and making this thing really shine and really tick. And I think Starlight Kid has since elevated the white belt to must-see television. Every white belt match, from the match with Natsupoi to the match with Rina to the grisly, absolute gut-wrenching match with Konami, and now to this epic as hell match with Azumi, is just something you have to watch, and you know you're going to be impressed in one way or the other. And I think she's done the same thing with the Artists of Stardom belts too. Now we have to credit Azumi to some degree for that. I think about the final stretch, the few minutes towards the end of their Artist win between Azumi and Saori Ano, that really made that match go to an even higher level. But the fact that
everything to me.
Oh, they were super, super intense. The fact that Starlight Kid is participating in both of these title pictures and doing so well at the same time is really, really super impressive. And that's coming from someone that was already impressed by all of her other work. When we talk about what can be next for Neo Genesis, we kind of already spoiled it as far as I can say, because I think they're going to try and scoop up Tomoka Inaba. I don't know how long it's going to take them to do that, but I think the next best option for them is somehow recruiting Tomoka Inaba and trying to get her out of her shell, which they're going to try very, very, very hard to do. We should also mention that there is unfinished business between Neo Genesis and the traitor Suzuki, shattering of Crazy Star. And it's a bit unfortunate because Mei Sarah, I guess, is down with illness, or she's not at 100%. She's not 100% well right now. So we've missed a couple of opportunities for them to build on that story, because they were booked to have a crossing of paths, or a couple of crossing of paths with Mei Sarah and Suzu. So we'll have to hold off on that for now, but they're definitely going to try and right that wrong in some form or another.
I believe Suzu is now sick as well. So in a way, their story's gotten paused, which, is good. This way, it's not just one person doing all the work.
Yeah, I know you're a huge fan of the work of Crazy Star. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss about that big plot twist?
They broke up. That's what I could add. I believe when we talked last year, we were talking about where can Crazy Stars go, because Crazy Stars were at the height of Stardom's success, popularity, because I think we didn't talk about like Mei winning the high speed, or Suzu winning the 5-star, or them winning Goddess as like the peak of Suzu and Mei, or just Crazy Star as a whole. I think the thing that made them popular or stand out better than most is that they did this unaffiliated. So the fact that the building blocks started to crumble, the house started burning once they became affiliated, it kind of sucks to see, because you then have to take a look at, the whole story of Crazy Stars and go, were they just better off by themselves?
I think it's another layer to this story that makes the story even better, which is that Suzuki came into Stardom as like an invader. She was a part of a faction that was not really fit for Stardom. They were trying to ruffle feathers. They were trying to start chipping the paint and wrecking shop when she was in prominence. And then she had such success, as you said, unaffiliated, that by the time she finally decided, I'm going to try and do the standard Stardom thing, the expected Stardom thing, which is join a faction and be this cohesive group identity. We found out that doesn't seem like it can work, at least not in the, as you're saying, at least not in that sort of expected orthodox way. If Suzuki is going to be a part of a faction, she's got to find a way to make it part of her identity, and to do it the way she wants to do it, with less rules, maybe even with no rules at all.
Yeah.
She finds the faction format to be too stale, and she finds the character traits of Neo Genesis, this positivity, this high energy sort of party atmosphere. She finds it to be really whack, and she doesn't want to take part in it. So and I guess that's probably a good place for us to switch to the discussion of the unaffiliated wrestlers so that we can start talking about Suzuki, who has returned to her natural habitat. No strings attached, no faction title, no faction name, no faction banner to be fighting under. And she's a part of a motley crew of other wrestlers. We have Matoi Hamabe, who is currently out with injury. You know what? We skipped a faction. So I'm going to rewind way back. Suzuki right now is trying to burn a hole through the center of Stardom, but there is a faction that might already be burning that really represents Stardom and is at the heart of Stardom that we need to talk about before we continue to find out what's going on with Suzu. Let's discuss the current status and maybe the fate of the Stars faction, which has in some ways been some of the most surprising and some of the most rapidly intense faction strife of them all. And you can't usually say that about Stars. In the past, what has happened to Stars is that their members have been either corrupted from an outside force or kidnapped, taken hostage by an outside force. But all the turmoil going on with Stars right now is coming from within, and it's not looking good. So if we're going to zoom in, place the magnifying glass on a specific wrestler, who are you going to choose for us to talk about?
I think with it being a new day and I think a chapter is going to be turned, I think we have to focus on Hanan. I think she is moving way too fast for us to play the waiting game. Hanan is taking center stage. She's taking charge. I'm not going to say Mayu isn't being a leader, but it is Hanan being the loudest, saying that there are problems within Stars. And I probably would say that I think winning Cinderella and Goddess Tag League kind of put a chip on her shoulder to start speaking up more. Like really saying like, hey, I'm not a kid anymore. These are the issues I want to address. Let's do something about it. And speaking up and I guess in a way, pointing the finger at Hazuki of all people, that is a choice. So I really want to focus on Hanan for this because I want to know, like, where did this shift come from?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with your choice of focus. I think this is a wrestler, and when you say is moving quickly, it's almost like this is a wrestler who's being prepped for some kind of leadership role or some kind of promoted position to be a higher ranking faction member or even a leader in her own right. You mentioned the tournament wins. She's challenged for the white belt. She went really, really far into last year's 5-star. She just had an absolutely on fire 2024, and she is not to be trifled with anymore. So you mentioned sort of the maturity and the willingness to speak up. And you're right about her choice of target. Hanan singling out Hazuki and calling out Hazuki, when you start to think about it, goes back quite a ways. When we talk about faction turmoil and faction anguish, we have to zoom all the way out and rewind. Some of the things that I even think about were happening last year. There was a period of time where Starlight Kid was unaffiliated and joining forces or trying out different factions. And Hazuki was very, very adamantly opposed to Starlight Kid's presence. She was very harshly kind of blocking her off. And then, of course, Hazuki and Starlight Kid ended up having a more like heated feud later on, involving trying to become the number one contender for the white belt. But Hazuki has had these sort of mean streaks. That was another crash out that she had against Starlight Kid when she was doing a lot of very villainous sort of moves and approaches in the match. The crowd started booing Hazuki when she faced Starlight Kid in a special singles match. And Hazuki started yelling and booing at the crowd right back, just truly committing to the worst parts of her own nature, the wildest, most aggressive parts of her nature, and doing one of the most heinous things you can do in Stardom, being such a sore loser at the end of the match with Starlight Kid that she unmasked Starlight Kid and held that mask up high and laughed and laughed and laughed. Absolutely despicable. We cannot condone this type of behavior, threatening to expose the true identity of the superhero vigilante known as Starlight Kid. I just can't abide by this. And I think Hanan has had enough as well. So maybe it's not as huge of a surprise when we see that Stars is not completely all sunshine and rainbows right now. We have one of the all-time great tag teams, FWC, Hazuki and Koguma, challenging an up-and-coming or a burgeoning tag team, the current Goddess champions, Hanan and Sayaka, and many, many different personal gripes. I will have to admit, some of them I don't even understand or quite follow, are going along with this. And Hanan is making sure that this doesn't continue to be bottled up. This doesn't continue to be in the background. These are some issues that need to be dealt with. They need to be spoken about. And hopefully when the dust settles and the smoke clears, we still have an intact faction at the end of it. So I guess that's the next thing we're going to have to ask is, can Stars survive this? And if they can, who's still a part of this group? Who's leaving? Who's joining? Or will they be able to just hold strong and maintain this same lineup that they've had for years at this point? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on the matter are, I think I might have to agree with Hanan that something has to change, or maybe someone has to go, or someone's attitude needs to be fixed. Because I was not aware of this. I recently found this out, I believe, like last week, that between, I believe, January to now, Hanan and Hazuki have only teamed once, and that was during the faction tournament that Neo Genesis ended up winning. And if that's the case, that means that they've only teamed up due to circumstance, and they've been avidly avoiding each other.
You know what's kind of interesting? We're starting to notice a pattern with Hanan, in that there are some people that we never would have guessed that she's beefing with behind the scenes. Famously, at this stage, she and May Sarah seem to hate each other's guts.
Oh, yes, they do.
And that seemed to have just come out of the blue, but it definitely was there. And they definitely both know it was there. So now we're adding someone else to this list. This is getting bad.
Maybe Hanan's the problem.
Yeah, she's the lowest common denominator in all of these math equations.
Problems with Ami, problems with May, problems with Hazuki. How crazy does it sound, Hanan being the problem? The definition of a babyface.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely insane. I guess anything's possible, though. If I'm going to try and figure out where Stars is going, or where Stardom is going with the faction, a lot of it does hinge on the future of Mayu, Iwatani, and Stardom. If Stars can survive not only whatever becomes of Mayu, Iwatani, and whatever becomes of Wingori versus FWC, I still think there are changes that have to occur. And I don't know where Koguma will fall on this side of things. But if there still is a Stars moving forward, I could definitely see Hazuki doing something different with her character. She has been teasing these moments of that old evil side, which never really fully left.
It never did.
If we're being honest, she always had a little bit of it still there, and she's been unapologetic about it at every turn. So I could see her revitalizing that, revisiting that darker side. Now, when we talk about the unaffiliated wrestlers, maybe we'll get a little bit more in depth with that. But as I mentioned with Hanan, and it's hard to talk about because it's hard to think and picture what this is like. But if there is a Stars without Mayu Iwatani in the future, because her future is uncertain at the time of this recording, Hanan, to me, seems like the most natural choice for a new leader. We have often talked about Hanan as a future ace or a future icon. And with the steps she is taking now, the career growth and the willingness to step forward and call out bad behavior and call out a problem when it arises, those are leadership qualities as far as I can tell. So I could see her taking the reins and being Stars' next leader, if that is what the future calls for.
I've called Hanan Little Icon for about maybe 2 years now. In case the worst case scenario, which is Mayu Iwatani leaving Stardom. But watching this unfold within Stars because of Stars also has me now having to look at everyone else. Because while we're talking about Mayu potentially leaving, or Hanan speaking up, and Hazuki being, well, I guess, Hazuki of old, we also have to notice how Momo Kogo, Sayaka, and Koguma are all just bystanders. No one's really playing peacemaker. They're just watching. Like, they don't know whose side to really take.
Yeah, that's very true. I think in character, they're hoping that somehow this will be resolved, and they will let Hazuki speak on one side of the argument and Hanan speak on the other side of the argument. And ultimately, it seems like the rest of the members are just hoping that things will end up okay and that the faction will end up okay. So it's really going to come down to how Hanan and Hazuki are able to try and resolve this. And will they be able to let certain things go, or will they hold on to them and hold the grudge?
Honestly, I must say this is the most divided I've ever seen Stars. Like, whenever I look at these 6 women, I don't see Stars. I don't see what I like to call the main characters of Stardom. I'm looking at Peach Rock, FWC, and Wingori. I don't see Stars right now.
Oh, that's an interesting distinction. I see what you're saying. It doesn't feel like a cohesive family anymore.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. I mean, it's a sad story they're telling. And the resolution will ultimately determine how we end up feeling about it as a complete story. Let's quickly go through the ranks of the unaffiliated, the unwanted, the discarded. No, I'm kidding. Let's just quickly go over the unaffiliated wrestlers here in Stardom. Suzuki is the newest addition to this unaffiliated collection. We have Matoi Hamabe, who is currently out with injury. It seems to be pretty much strongly implied that she would be joining the Stars faction. So I think that's still a possibility for her down the road. We have Akira Kuragane, who is quite a badass, a very confident rookie, which you don't always see. She's got attitude already, and I could see her doing something with Suzu in the future. It doesn't even have to be a faction. They could just start a sort of a reign of terror as a tag team and really start, pulling people's hair out and, smacking people around. We have Yuria Hime, which I talked about her a little bit when we talked about EXV. I could absolutely see her joining that group and being the successor to Mina Shirakawa, the little sister who is trying to accomplish something in Stardom in her, I don't want to say in her memory, but, in her absence.
Right.
And lastly, we have Ane Kanaya, another confident rookie, a rookie with some skills, with some dance moves. She can work the crowd, and she is not holding back. Unfortunately, in that not holding back, it appears that during some type of training session, she was stricken with an injury, but she seems pretty prepped and ready to join a faction like Cosmic Angels. So there's a lot of wiggle room and a lot of future directions for this class of unaffiliated wrestlers to branch out towards. How are you enjoying this batch of unaffiliated wrestlers? This would be a good chance to talk about, if you want, what you think is next for Suzuki, or really anybody in this mix that you want to pick out and discuss.
So I want to pick out real quick, Mateo, real quick, because I know you said that she was kind of prepped for Stars and everything, but I think she was actually prepped for God's Eye. While Mateo did have her debut match, her rookie match against Hanan, and Hanan was basically trying to recruit her like off rip, she didn't really give a flat out answer. Now, I can't remember which tag match it was. Maybe it was with like Stars, but I remember it was either Hanan or Koguma, one of them, that said, hey, this is really fun. Do you know which faction you want to go that you would like to join? And with the utmost confidence, and this is the only reason I can like pinpoint her, just with so much confidence, God's Eye. And everyone's, what? God's Eye. I want to join God's Eye. I think she was like 5 matches in, like 5-6 matches in, to already be dead set on a faction and for it to be God's Eye, which I'm not going to say it's hard to get into God's Eye, but it's also not as easy. For Mateo to see the God's Eye style, say, I want to be a part of that. I want to learn from that. That caught my eye immediately.
Yeah, you know what? I had forgotten about that. There was this whole sort of angle that was developing with certain wrestlers trying to recruit her and her attention being in a completely different direction. So I'm glad you're bringing that back up, because she's been absent so long at this point that had completely slipped my mind. So that's a very good reference. And who knows, now that these other rookies have shown up and we have all this roster sort of distortion and disruption, she very well could end up in a faction like God's Eye, or maybe they just decide something completely new and make a completely off the wall decision with her, because she was very skilled in the matches that I saw. So she probably doesn't need a lot of development, and she can catch up with where the other rookies are at, I think, without much fuss or much time required.
Another person that's like caught my eye, and I think it only took the first or second match, is, I don't know how to say her last name, so sorry. I'm just going to call her Anna. Mm-hmm. So Anna, she caught my eye because of her moveset. It was colorful. attention grabbing. She even did the string of events, the lineup of moves that looked very similar to Natsupoi's Fairy Blink.
Oh, yeah.
And even Natsupoi's, even on Twitter, was thinking, oh, I thought she was going to do Fairy Blink for a second. And I didn't know that she could dance, so thank you for pointing that out. So she seems very, very prone for the possibility of Cosmic Angels, yes. But I also believe she has this bright attitude that also fits Stars. So I could see a lot of these girls in like separate factions, but due to Suzu leaving Neo Genesis, I can actually see Suzu manipulating everyone here.
Oh.
Because I don't know everyone's exact age, but the one thing Suzu can just slam on everyone, go, hey, you want to join that group, you want to join this group. I understand that. They look cool, they sound cool, but take it from me, a former freelancer, I did a lot when I wasn't signed, and I did more when I wasn't a part of anybody. Follow me, you'll end up on the top.
So I got to thank you very, very much for chatting about these topics with me. Enigma V4, can you please let the folks listening and or watching know where they can find you, what you've been up to, and what you are all about, what you've got in the laboratory?
So you guys can follow me on my wrestling podcast, Talk for Glory, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever there's wrestling, wherever there's podcasts, there is Talk for Glory. On Talk for Glory, we do like to branch out. So there's some Stardom, there's some New Japan, there's some AEW, there's some WrestleMania. We are in the month of April. And as much as there's other wrestling companies, there's the grandest stage in them all. So without fail, look forward to WrestleMania predictions, review, gameplay, things of that nature. But I'm not just going to be done there, because I'm going to have to be talking about Stardom All-Star Grand Queendom by the end of this month. So if you guys enjoyed me here on Red Belt Radio, you guys can go listen on Talk for Glory, my predictions for that as well. Maybe I might just focus on champions. Maybe I might focus on the whole show. So you guys can follow Talk for Glory for that information. And then for social medias, you guys can follow my Instagram at Enigma_V4. You guys can follow my Twitter at Enigma_V4_. And then if you guys are into gaming, you guys can add me on my Twitch at Enigma_V4_.
Excellent. Excellent. This was a very fun discussion, very thought-provoking. So thank you very much for chatting with me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching.